Welcome to Doing Good by Doing Better, the podcast for world shapers, not spectators. I'm Margaret Rogers, CEO of Pariveda, a professional services firm that helps make potential possible for our clients. On this show, I talk with founders, executives, and innovators who share hard lessons, bold ideas, and real strategies for purpose-driven growth. This episode will offer practical insights you can use this week to solve forward. Because at Pariveda, we know that doing good only endures when we keep learning how to do better. Today, I'm with Joel Austin, Senior Vice President and Chief Digital Officer at Oncor, a regulated transmission and distribution utility company in the state of Texas. Joel leads technology, analytics, and customer engagement for more than 13 million Texans who rely on the grid every day. Joel has spent more than 3 decades at the intersection of technology, energy, and transformation. In this conversation, he shares what it takes to lead through disruption and how he helps his IT teams stay inspired by their real-world impact. Joel believes that the best performers have what he calls the accountability gene, and that innovation has to be guided by trust, safety, and responsibility when the work quite literally keeps the lights on. Let's jump in. I was very connected to some of the things that you care about, really the service, like how do we serve our customers and continue to improve that customer service. And you know me, anytime you say customer experience, I get all warm and fuzzy. So I'm excited to be talking to you about that. Talk a little bit about your professional journey and how it led you to leading transformation and innovation at Oncor.
Whenever I talk about the journey that I've been on in my career, it tends to start when I moved to Texas. I did work before that, but when I moved to Texas in the end of 1989, I was working for a regulated gas transmission and distribution business and really thought to myself that this would be a stable career that you could count on. And it's really been anything but that. It's been a career of change. The one string that runs all the way through it is my connection to technology. And boy, how lucky can you be to start a technology career in 1989 when these personal computers were things just sort of gathering dust on people's desks as we didn't know what to do with them, compared to now when without digitization and sensors, we probably wouldn't know what to do with ourselves. So that journey has just been full of process, people, and technology change. And there hasn't been one day of it where it's been standard operating without facing some kind of change either coming at us or change that we are initiating to meet the markets that we serve. So it's been a great 35 years.
I love how you think about the opportunity that occurs when change is constant. And I would imagine one of the things about your career is that you've led through mergers and outsourcing and restructuring in moments that can be really challenging for teams in general. Can you share a time when you had to rebuild belief inside a team that had been told maybe not so great things, like whether it be that they were expendable or they were working themselves out of a job, and what that experience taught you about restoring confidence?
The experience of a first generation outsourcing event is perhaps one of the most disruptive events that I've lived and worked through in my career. At the time, it was sort of a corporate change that most people couldn't envision, and not many were going through willingly. But fundamentally, when people are told they're a commodity, it can damage their psyche. It certainly can erode confidence and even their belief in themselves and what they're doing, particularly when they're providing an absolutely essential service, which in my business, the modern grid does not run well without technology. So like you said, I tend to look at change as an opportunity, and having lived through sort of the turmoil of that experience and seeing what it did to a number of my friends and colleagues, and then also alternatively, what it was doing to the businesses in which we worked, I tend to look at how can we maintain the advantages you can get from a different operating model like that, but undo the damage that it does to many members of the workforce that are a key part of the success of that operating model. And Oncor gave me that great chance to come in and do that sort of massive reset by taking the best of both worlds and then giving me the bandwidth to help bring people along and create a superior operating model to the one that first generation provided us. Because I believe that it doesn't really matter what your model is or what technologies you're using. If you don't have the right people in the right place, feeling incented and rewarded, like they're a part of the team that is serving the customers that are paying the bills, then you have an operating model that isn't going to last very long.
Yeah, 100%. You talk about how the best performers often have the accountability gene. What does that look like in practice? And how do you cultivate that across your team, especially when you're trying to get to high performance?
It's a great question. Yeah, people generally fall into a couple of categories, at least in my experience in business. And it's those who prefer to operate within a system and those who prefer to question, improve, and even redefine the system. And I think there's probably equal numbers of both, but you can further define those who tend to do what's in front of them versus those who feel personally responsible for the results of their own or the work of their teams. And that individual has the accountability chain. It's not just about, am I doing what's in front of me? Is it generating the intended result? And more specifically, is it meeting or exceeding the expectations of those that we're serving? And once you found somebody with that accountability gene, they need to be nurtured and protected, as company results will depend upon those people. I'm sure there will be a day when the results may not depend on the individual's feeling a sense of accountability and taking that extra step or recognizing a fault in a process that isn't satisfying the customer. But today, in today's business world, it absolutely depends on that. And, I can think of across the couple of thousand people that are a part of the group that I lead, I know the majority of them that have this gene. And it's not just words. I try and make sure that myself and the other leaders nurture and protect those people because we rely upon them so much.
I often hear it's really important that leaders walk the walk, right? As part of that. And I know for yourself, you don't talk about the accountability gene just for anybody. You also walk the walk, right?
Yeah, it's really behavior that has to be modeled. And when I look at my peer group in Encore, I don't really see anybody who doesn't have that. But you tend to succeed in our business by not only having that, but then, as you say, walking that talk and exhibiting it for others to try and bring out that or mine that skill set and or that trait in the members of the team so you can continue to broaden that across your enterprise. The reality is you need both to succeed and to operate over a long period of time. But when you find it, it really is like finding a golden nugget, to me
Yeah.
anyway.
I want to turn the conversation back to customer experience. Technology teams can lose touch with the customer. Sometimes they're not given the access points to really be thinking about the customer. And you have been thinking about this and saying we need to actually bring ourselves to the forefront with the customer and helping your teams rediscover serving customers, not just maintaining processes and developing cool IT. Talk a little bit about your journey in that and how did you shift that thinking and how did that shift your culture?
So my experience has taught me that the further removed from a customer a specific role or a function or a person becomes, the more likely it is to become artificially tiered as, okay, over here, we're the business, but over here, you people that are removed from the customers, you're service providers. And it's a classic sort of model in the utility industry that I grew up in. And the fallacy of that model that I've viewed over many, many years is that the further you get away from understanding the line of sight to what you're doing that provides value to that customer and why they pay your bills, the more likely it is that the interests or the goals of this service provision entity no longer aligns with why our customers pay our bills. And, human nature can be a funny thing. Another problem with that model is people often like to define their own importance based upon the relative lack of importance of other people around them, right? So if I'm in the business and you're a service provider, I'm the business and you're not. Well, if you want to give people a sort of an artificial reason not to perform, classify them as less important, call them a service provider and not the business. This whole business versus IT sort of culture spans every year of my career. And early on, it became a bit of a rallying cry to me, and Oncor gave me the opportunity to make it real, to sort of redefine that so that the technology function would be an operating pillar of the company. We engineer, build, and operate electricity transmission assets, electricity distribution assets. Well, we do the same thing with technology assets. So effectively what we've accomplished here after 15 years is adding a pillar to what is our business. Now it helps that it's technology, and technology is ubiquitous within our industry. There's not a job, I think, in our company that doesn't rely upon it. And every single one of our 13 million customers relies upon it. But bringing that mindset and that culture and sort of eliminating this business versus not business is a key part to creating, I think, groups and roles that make people fulfilled and energize them and make them want to come to work. Nobody likes to be a second class citizen in any aspect of life. And that applies to work too.
We always talk about it in Pariveda, you have to build it from the inside out, right? When you have your employees understand how they are part of the business, then on the outside, you'll have happier customers at the end of the day.
Amen.
Now,
That's one of the reasons we do business with Pariveda is your people have that mindset and they want to be a part of meeting and exceeding the expectations of Oncor's customers.
yeah, we're very excited to be part of your transformation for sure and be involved as a partner. I will kind of go back and reference something that you said when you talked about your career. And it was decades, right? You've been with Encore for a long time, guiding it through massive changes and transformation. What has kept you anchored through those transitions? And when you think about legacy, what do you most hope endures beyond your lifespan?
Well, that's another great question. And our industry is a bit unique and that tenure isn't unusual. In fact, in Encorees, if your years of service doesn't start with a 4, as in 40, oftentimes you don't make it onto the first page of the retirement announcement section of the intranet. But that doesn't just happen by accident. It speaks to a culture that people want to be a part of. It speaks to a culture of sort of the spirit of first responders, because due to the nature of our work and due to the nature of our service territory and in North Texas, we have lots of storm and weather events, and that impacts the delivery and impacts some of the assets that we operate. So this notion of staying with one company for a long period of time, I'm drawn to that spirit of first responder and provider of a critical service. When I think about legacy, these days I'm looking at 5 to 10 years because technology cycles keep speeding up so much. Who in the heck knows what things are even going to look like in 2030, 2035, or 2040. I listened to Elon Musk talk about how our phones will no longer have apps and really be phones. It'll just be an entry point for AI to assist us as we live our daily lives. So, and he's not talking about that being 10 years from now. He's talking about being 5 or sub 5. So I want our employees and our partners to have successful and meaningful work well into the future. And I want Oncor to be very successful in facing all the challenges that arise. And to that end, we talked about this before. I believe that culture eats strategy for lunch. And that's why so much of my own focus is on being a part of building a culture that gives Oncor and its workforce the platform from which to be successful, facing disruption head on, because disruption always comes, and being used to operating in times of whitewater or turbulence. Don't be afraid of it. Recognize that it brings opportunity along with that challenge. We like to talk at Oncor about how important your network is to your own success. And we invest significant amount of money in the development of our people. And a lot of these development opportunities come with the chance to build networks. So I try and create that platform from which people can have that network and utilize that network, and not just within Oncor. Some of the most important aspects of my network stretch to the practitioners at Pariveda and other places who I've either been part of or personally brought back into Oncor to help us meet some of these challenges and build some of this technology as we move so rapidly into the future. And we wouldn't have been successful without them. When I think about my network, it's not the 5,000 people within Oncor. That's the sort of the foundation of it. It's probably the 10 or 15,000 people that are in our partners that make our day-to-day business run, which Pariveda is, a nice part of that.
When you think about the short-term cycles of technology, you yourself, though, have such a long-term view. How do you sustain a sense of purpose over the long term? How does that shift how you think about leadership? What really truly matters in leadership?
Well, the one thing that's always been constant is that technology comes in phases and operates in cycles. And regardless of what business you're in, the pace at which you try and employ that technology is different. If you were to go back to the 90s and some of the groundbreaking technology was in networking, I still remember the first time that we actually, hooked personal computers together and people started collaborating in an email system that was homegrown because there really weren't email systems yet. If you think back to the pace of cycles like that and then compare it to today when we're all sort of running quickly to catch up or maintain pace with this technology called artificial intelligence that even the practitioners are really learning about as they go. It's just, if you're energized by challenges and by change, what a great time to live and work. And in my case, what a great industry to be a part of, because when I think of how we operated the grid, which it did operate before computers, the grid is over 100 years old. So it clearly existed before computing, but it wasn't optimized before computing. And so much reliance today is on how we not just maintain the flow of electricity, but how we optimize that. The Texas market is designed to optimize the price points and maintain an affordable delivery of electricity. And it's now matched with needing to do that reliably. Reliability is a big issue now. And then further compounding that challenge is the large loads that exist today with AI data centers and chip manufacturing and oil and gas, since we serve the Permian Basin and West Texas, and just all the growth of population in Texas with people coming here and the businesses and homes and schools and all the commerce that surrounds that. Every bit of that runs on electricity, every single bit of it. So if you want to maintain energy across a long horizon, work in our industry. The challenge is ever present every single day. And like I said before, we had this spirit of being first responders. Every once in a while, you have an event come in that sort of flips a switch, causes damage, and then puts you in the mode of sort of resetting and bringing that service back to people. One of the cool things I think about our business is the very highest levels of satisfaction we get in any of our customer sentiment tracking is when they interact with one of our linemen in the field. Closely behind that is some of our digital channels, but really it's about the people and the chance they get to actually interact with one of us in the field, because it's so important what they do. And they are really the face of the company during these times when service is out and you're trying to restore it. So just so many opportunities to get fulfillment. That's a big part of what keeps me energized and happy about working in a place like this that has changed so much over the course of those years, but still is about energizing our customers' modern lives. It has been for every one of those 35 years.
One of the things I think is interesting about utilities, especially for Oncor, is people don't think about the service you provide until it's disrupted, right? And then it actually requires a lot of innovation and a lot of thinking to make sure that the grid continues to be very reliable and you're always evolving that. So, you helped pioneer one of the first large scale smart metering systems, automating that outage management for millions of customers. And so, looking back, what was the turning point when you realized that innovation wasn't just about being efficient? It was really about transforming the customer experience.
I think that's a great example because it was probably our first extremely large and intentional digitization efforts. Sensors existed long before we had digital meters, but taking what is now 4.1 million sensors, which were analog devices, and then creating this digital sensor, what I'm not sure any of us appreciated was all the data that was going to become available based on having that advanced meter now in place of what was formerly an analog meter that we would interact with one time a month when we read it. Now we would have a digital sensor that every 15 minutes produces many, many, many data points that then can be not only bundled up, cross-referenced, correlated with data that comes from other parts of our grid, but that can then be packaged and presented in part to our customers as information about their service. One thing that has been true, and for me, at least over the last 10 or 15 years, is we really don't make a distinction between the information that we are given from Amazon about our package delivery, Domino's Pizza about the status of our delivery, Uber about where is my car and how soon is it going to be here. Why can't the electric company provide me perfect service about the status of either my restoration because I'm out, or my new service request because I'm waiting for them to hook me up so I can get on with whatever it is that I'm trying to accomplish, whether it's my home or a business or someplace else. So there is no distinction between us and anybody else. And the onset of that digital metering system was really what provided us data about an individual residence or business. Before that, if you went way back in time, the electric company would ask people to make sure their porch light was on as they drove down the street, because then they could know that service was on at that residence. And then between then and now, we would have a sensor out at the feeder level or at the substation. And that would communicate to us that if service was on to that line going out of the substation, well, those lines can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,000 premises hooked up to them. So now we know at every single premise the status of that service. We also know the temperature of the meter. We know the voltage that's being delivered to that meter, and we can cross-reference that upstream with other data and start predicting outages, predicting maintenance on equipment, forecasting that so that we can eliminate service outages. It really was, I think, the watershed event for us in our industry, being able to, number one, improve reliability, but number two, provide information to our customers that we've never really been able to do before. And we still use it as an innovation engine for how we provide more granular information to customers than even we did, say, last year. So that's why it's such a great example of innovation and the opportunity to think about how you run your business differently and how you interact with your customers in a better way.
Data, like even now, right? Everybody needs an update as soon as they can. And the expectation of that, being able to touch that data so quickly and get those updates is now just become table stakes.
Amen to that.
Now, you've lived through major industry inflection points. For those who don't know, Texas opened its electricity market to retail, I think it was in 2002. So it's a deregulated industry in Texas, to now applying generative AI into the business and having the opportunity to think about that. And each of these is really redefining what it means to lead in utilities. So how do you decide which technologies are worth the risk, and what principles do you use to guide your approach to that kind of innovation?
I feel fortunate to work for a company where we are very pragmatic about technology. We don't chase technology for the sake of that. What we do is we have goals in either serving our customers or the stakeholders in the state of Texas. And then we work through what technologies can help us either accomplish that goal or improve upon what we've already done before. And when you have that kind of pragmatic approach, it allows you the freedom to assess risk, whether it's delivery risk of whatever that technology is, whether it's skill set risk. You have the right skill sets to not only deliver it, but to operate it. Because, once you deploy technology, it needs to run at least 99 with five nines, right? If not 100% of the time. So it's not just about can I acquire it and can I conceive of how it plays a part of us running our business. It's about how well can I perform with that as a part of the toolkit. And you mentioned it before. I oftentimes talk about how almost all of our challenges today are data challenges. There's so many technologies available to us. It's about, do we have the data in the right place, in the right shape, in order to utilize it with some new technology in order to provide a better service? When you look at the stage we're in now with artificial intelligence, we've been using machine learning models for a decade. Every aspect of the sort of infancy of AI we've exploited. Now with generative and agentic being very real potential tools for us, it's about what are the primary challenges that are important to our customers and stakeholders that we can use those technologies to solve. And there are aspects of operating the grid that, like you said, people don't think about until there's an outage. We invest a lot of money and a lot of time in maintaining the resilience of the grid. And that includes not just resilience from weather, but resilience from things like wildfires. And believe it or not, one of the initial points in which we're using AI is in wildfire detection and mitigation. Texas, like some other states, California is sort of the epicenter of facing this wildfire risk, and oftentimes having the root cause of that being an electric line. So try to ensure that we are using technology to understand the status of the operation of this grid every second of every day. Technology and data is a huge part of that. So I like to think that at Oncor, we have the opportunity to assess risk, to understand our chances for success, and how well we'll integrate it, and how well the data that it relies upon and that it produces can be a part of the overall ecosystem of technology that we use to satisfy every requirement we have, first and foremost, which is serving those 13 million customers.
I know that Oncor is now working with Pariveda to chart its course in AI. How do you balance that excitement and sometimes maybe overshooting of emergent technology with the responsibility of trust, safety, and reliability? All the values that are part of Oncor and who you are.
Yeah, I'm glad you are drivers for what we do and what we think is important here. And one of the aspects that I think we're all still learning about is safety around the security of data when you're deploying artificial intelligence. The security of our data, since we are a critical infrastructure provider and part of the critical infrastructure towers that really make the country run, it's a matter of national security that we are ensuring that we understand where our data is and are protecting it such that it does not fall into the hands of a threat actor of any kind. So I think every business has the challenges of securing their data. If it is to find its way into the wrong place, we have sort of the added concern of national security associated with the delivery of electricity in this service territory that we're in. So I think that's going to shake out sometime soon in terms of what that means for our growth plans and for where we serve and how quickly we serve. But Oncor is mandated to serve the customers that live and work in our service territory. So we're going to do everything we possibly can to do that along a pace that satisfies whomever it is, whether it's a commercial, industrial, or residential customer. And technology is the fundamental way in how we provide that service. So again, it's just such a ripe ecosystem for new technologies, and AI is a big part of that. And ensuring that as we do it, we're doing it in a way that's going to lead to safe, reliable, cost-effective delivery of electricity, because you can't just invest in every single thing that's out there. The affordability of electricity is now and will become even a more important issue in the future based on our reliance upon it.
Yeah. I want to circle back on something that you talked about in terms of your legacy, but actually didn't mention in your answer. And I heard that you personally championed an internship program that helped launch a lot of careers at Oncor. What originally sparked that idea, and that commitment to develop up and coming talent? And how has seeing those early interns rise inside the company shape your perspective on leadership?
Being a member of the senior leadership team at Oncor is an enormous privilege. And you were afforded opportunities to find new and better ways to develop, enrich our workforce, and ultimately serve our customers. And speaking personally as a father, I'm driven by wanting the best for my children, like we all are. And I recall well my own experience early in my career, including the challenges of building a network from absolute scratch. When I moved to Texas for my first job, I only knew one person in Texas, and that's the person who hired me. So my network was pretty much one at that point. And being able to champion vehicles like an internship program, which is a valuable pipeline for young talent's entry into Oncor, but it's also a launching pad for so many young people to gain their footing in business. I get a lot of satisfaction from helping people take those first steps. Because when I think back to what it was like in my era, there weren't these vehicles, or they were pretty rare. I'm a firm believer that it's about leaving it better than you found it. And that applies to the individual lives of all of these people. And it's such a privilege to look at the people that graduated through that and work in Oncor and are very successful. But I also hear from those that didn't come to Oncor out of it, but they're successful where they are. And they all credit that in some small way of being part of that success. So I think it's a chance for us not only to enhance our pipeline for people to come in, but just to give back and help young people figure out how they're going to take those first steps in life.
One of the things that's been coming out lately, of course, is the job market and companies that are claiming that they're no longer really hiring the same level of entry types of positions. And I always think about how that's such a short-term view because you need the younger folks to come in and bolster the future leadership. Otherwise, you're not going to have future leaders in the first place.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Keep those internships going.
For certain, even with all the study and reading that I've done and we're doing around artificial intelligence, I've yet to see how it truly replaces people. It will change jobs. It will augment us. But the worldview where it replaces us, I think leads to not a shiny, happy place. So I think here we tend to look at it as how it will augment our ability to provide better service, make better decisions, and do things maybe faster. But it's still about people, and it's still about developing people so that they can be the leaders in the future, particularly if we want to continue to be a going concern. So that's our point of view around it at Oncor. And I'm happy to be a part of a company that has that sort of worldview, because those folks still need something to do, until there's different sort of models and how we operate as a society. We still need to help young people figure out what it is they're going to do. And while meeting the challenges of a business like ours and providing that service in the most cost effective way, it still involves people.
100%. All right. So here's the lightning round. First thing that comes to your mind. What is a book you often recommend?
So I don't often recommend books, but when I do, one of them that I really liked back in the 90s was called The Burning Platform. And its basis was people won't change. If you talk to them about it, they need to understand that the platform that they're standing on is on fire. And oftentimes it's up to the leader to help articulate how that is the case. But maybe more recently, a book by Simon Sinek, Leaders Eat Last.
Mm-hmm.
It's, to me, a good articulation of what servant leadership is and how it can be a truly successful way to help create a culture where people are successful. And it also speaks to me because that's how I was raised. And I like the fact that there's a business book that articulates it.
I like that. Raised as a servant leader.
Yeah.
A favorite quote. What's your favorite quote?
So I have one that'll make my friend and CIO laugh here. But yeah, we only grow as individuals and teams when we are outside our comfort zone. So much of my career has been outside my comfort zone. And I really, when you speak honestly and transparently, particularly in one-on-one mentoring type situations, a lot of people aren't extroverts when they are born or when they are young. And I was absolutely not one. And the gentleman I'm quoting was a Force Recon Marine who now runs a development entity called The Program. And his name's Eric Kapitulak, and he lives that sort of mantra. And I'd like to think that I've lived it over the course of mine too. So that's a quote that is pretty representative of how I think.
What's a habit you live by?
Okay. Rise early, get to work early, read often, and learn constantly. One thing that's been consistent for me is I get in early, and a great mentor to me over 30 years ago did the same thing and recognized it and rewarded it and incented me to do it. And there's just something about that first 60 to 90 minutes where you can really get a lot accomplished, regardless of what that is. You can get a lot accomplished for sort of the daily churn begins to happen. And the further you get into the leadership experience, the more important it is that you have that time, because your time is not your own usually. And if it is, what are you really leading?
That's a very good point. And I definitely find my best time in the morning, that quiet period. Even now with the time change, it's dark and you
Yep.
wake up and you're like, there's just something that helps you really focus in that moment.
For sure. For sure.
Gives you hope about the future of utilities and energy.
Most visions of the future are just so interwoven with energy. It's essential to our advancement as a species, at least the way we think about advancement now. And regardless of the source or the fuel or the delivery mechanism, the views of the future that are, I think, optimistic all involve energy. So I think that's what drives my belief that I work in the right place and there's a bright future for it.
It has been so amazing to have you on this podcast and just giving us your view and your experience. Where can listeners learn more about you or Oncor's innovation work?
Our web presence, Oncor.com, is a great entry point into who we are and what we do and how we do it. I take every chance I can get to speak in different forums. And Margaret, I really appreciate the chance to get to do this with you. I'm really impressed that you do it and see how cool that is in your role at Pariveda, that this is a part of the arsenal that you have. So, and I appreciate the chance to get to come on and talk with you about these topics. So I think it's these things which give people a window into different ways of thinking and different sort of experiences, because you never really stop learning. I think when you stop learning, that's probably when you need to pack it in.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Although you'd almost have to try to stop learning, right? In this kind of
Just cut everything off, probably.
Yeah, exactly. What encouragement would you offer to leaders navigating the intersection of technology and really long-term impact?
I don't want it to be flippant, but if I can do it, anybody can. I was not classically trained as a technologist, and yet my entire career has spanned just some evolution of technology. So it's really about having that accountability gene, being curious, meeting a lot of people and thinking about how technology can improve people's lives. And so no better time now than to be somebody who has big dreams and big goals around being a part of that value chain.
Well, you heard it here. Being very people focused in a very technology enabled kind of industry, focus on the future, invest in the future, and keep your values all in check as you're leading with purpose. So thank you again so much for joining us today. We were just very fortunate to have you as a guest.
Well, thanks again, Margaret. I really appreciate getting to do it.
Thanks for listening to Doing Good by Doing Better. I'm Margaret Rogers, CEO of Pariveda, and I hope this conversation offered you a new way to take your ideas to impact. Follow on Apple or Spotify and join us every other week as we keep learning how to do good by doing better.